Welcome back to another episode of the Next Level Minds podcast. My name is Chris Chapman, and I am your host. And if this is your first time tuning in, then this is a podcast dedicated to those who want to reach a next level in their faith, family, fitness, or finances. And the way in which we do that is by interviewing various guests on this show, and we really talk through their story of how they have gotten from point A to point B and overcame setbacks, adversities, and failures along the way. We also have solo episodes where I'll talk through various personal development related topics such as goal setting, habit formation, finances, everything else in between those avenues as well. But before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to reiterate that my goal here is to impact over 1 million people. So if you have not done this already, please take the time to subscribe to Next Level Minds podcast on Apple Podcast. And then share this episode with a family member, friend, or colleague if you think they'll get some value out of it. And lastly, leave a review of Next Level Minds on Apple Podcast. Throw 5 stars on there. Let me know what you think. So that'll be pushed higher and higher on the business-related content. Let's go ahead and dive into who today's guest is. I have the opportunity to sit down with Wilson Zehr. He is the founder of multiple different companies, but most specifically Zehr Mail, which really helps companies streamline the process of sending physical mail for business development. He has some awesome perspectives when it comes to business, raising money, going through different adversities and setbacks. He also has a lot of perspective when it comes to where the market is right now in business, as he's very involved in being a professor at college. So he teaches things like business, finance, marketing, sales. So he definitely is going to bring a unique perspective when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, and all those other great avenues there. So let's go ahead and dive in to hear what Wilson has to say. Wilson, thanks so much, man, for hopping on the Next Level Minds podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
I know before we started recording, you said it's an unusually busy Tuesday, so appreciate you making the time, of course.
No, of course. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's I always feel like the start of this week, I'm like, all right, it's not going to be that busy July 4th week. And then I'm like, this week's even busier than last week. I feel like that just happens with life, right?
Oh, yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, but it was supposed to be a sleepy Monday here too, or Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday. It just didn't work out that way.
Yeah. But hey, that's good in business. Honestly, being busy, that means something's going right, in my opinion. So,
yeah.
Well, I'd love if you could take us back to the earlier days. I'm just curious, like always speaking with folks like yourself, like what was kind of the shaping of your mindset that just kind of gave you the courage to go ahead and jump in and start your own thing. I know you spent a little bit of time in corporate America, right? But just kind of curious the mindset approach where you're like, all right, I'm going to jump ship and make something happen for myself.
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it was a kind of evolutionary. I don't think it happened all at once. You know, I have an undergraduate degree in finance with a minor in computer science. Started out as a software engineer. Spent 5 or 6 years doing software engineering work, which was fun. I mean, I worked for a great company, and it was, the reason why I chose software engineering over finance is because it paid better, and it flexed time, and I got to go to work in shorts, so didn't have to wear a tie, so I thought that was pretty fun. But at some point, I also made the realization that no matter how hard I worked, even if I did everything I was supposed to do, I delivered every bullet point on my to-do list and checked every box, the company could still not be successful, possibly. And I don't like that feeling of not having enough control over my destiny. So, I went back and got my MBA, went back into marketing, and through a series of different changes, spent time in marketing, business development, strategic alliances, executive management, and then ended up starting the first company with a couple of friends called Diffusion, which is voice over IP gateways and applications. It was basically a Intel spinoff. So I did it with couple of friends from Intel. It was jointly funded by Intel, Microsoft, France Telecom, Telecom Italia, and had a fairly good experience with that. Grew that one and sold it to a company in Europe, and then just and managed to start Zehr, which is jointly funded by Hewlett Packard and Draper Fisher Jurvetson. DFJ, Draper Fisher Jurvetson, people also call DFJ. DFJ is a tier one California VC. They funded stuff like Hotmail and Skype and a bunch of others. And that was a good experience too. We managed to sell that company a couple of times, have it back again. So
Meant to be.
Yeah, no, exactly. It keeps coming back. Along the way, we've done a dozen other startups. I've been part of or advised or helped other people, and some of the other companies I worked at, computer companies like Sequent, were startups too. So I was kind of raised in the startup environment, and then when I had the opportunity to do my own thing, I kind of jumped at it. But it was for me, it was an evolutionary process. I didn't just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I'm going to start a business." And most of the business I'm talking about took capital to start. I mean, to start Zehr, we started out with, I don't know, a couple $1 million and then brought in another 10 from HP and some money from GE Capital and some other folks. So, a little different than starting a food truck or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, two questions there. I guess the first one, you mentioned you started the first one with a couple buddies from Intel, right? So like early on, what is your suggestion if you have an idea and you're a founder to just kind of sell that vision of, hey, come with me, like this is going to go big places,
Yeah, that's a great question too. I mean, it typically with a startup, I mean, I teach entrepreneurship at the university level too, so I do run into these questions from time to time too. And what I would say is most large successful startups are not just one person, they're a team.
Mm-hmm.
And people bring different skills to that team. Microsoft, Apple, a lot of the large companies you think of, Google, were not started by one individual. They were started by a team that, in some cases they were a technical team. And then the VCs had to bring in some more management talent or finance talent or other people to round out that team. But I think it's important to have a shared vision, and of what you want to create. Everybody should bring some value to the equation, and you should really enjoy working together. Doing startups is hard. It's hard work, and not every day is going to be a good day, and you need to be able to support each other, through thick and thin. And that's a lot of times that requires relationships, very strong relationships.
Yeah, and when you're looking at, and that's a good point about that shared vision. I feel like that's super important, especially with how tough it can be to do a startup. When you're building out a team, is your kind of like suggested approach like, okay, we need an ops guy, a tech guy, a sales, like do you have like a preferred stack, or is it just kind of like what happens, if that makes sense?
No, it depends on, sometimes, I mean, people just get together and have an idea.
Yeah.
The guys that, Uber,
Oh,
they
true.
started out, they had to start out with a problem they were trying to solve.
Yep.
And it was, the guys in the room. And, I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to build. And I guess that comes back to my academic background too, this idea that not all businesses are created equal. And we need to really understand what's strategic, right? We need to own the strategic, and everything else that we can build by our partner. We can go outside together. So what kind of business are you trying to build? Whether in a technology space, oftentimes the technology folks, having a good technology folks or a good technology team is the primary thing you need.
Yep.
But I also know from talking with a bunch of VCs, they say, when we have portfolio companies, if they have issues, those issues are usually in marketing and sales. People know how to build stuff. They just have trouble selling stuff.
Yeah.
So So, those skills are pretty important too. So I think you need both, but I'm also thinking, in some cases you may need other kinds of skills. I mean, if you wanted to start a company that did um, big events, for example, concerts or something, well, you probably want somebody who understands that environment, understands how to work with artists, how to work with the venues, how to do contracts, and they wouldn't necessarily need to know how to link a list or sort an array.
Yeah.
but
Yep.
But in the technology space, it turns out that the technology is pretty key. Even though I will say that one of the things we know in technology for certain is that the best technology doesn't always win. You
Mm.
can have the best technology in the world and still be unsuccessful. So there's usually more required than just the technology stack.
Yeah, and is that from like the marketing and sales lens that you mentioned there, that it's just not getting out
Yeah,
there to the broader world, you know?
yeah. You buy marketing and sales. It could be
Yeah.
strategic alliances. It could be um, industry knowledge, specific industry knowledge. It just really depends what you're building. Every startup is just a little bit different. I would love to just give you a silver bullet and say, it's
Yeah,
A, but it's going to be different. And we need to, each business, we need to take it apart and look at it and say, what do we think is strategic to our success? And if it's strategic to our success, we need to hold it close and own it. If it's not, then we can get it from somewhere else. And, with a lot of startups, the one thing we know is that well, I mean, I don't know if this is popular to say, but most startups fail,
yeah, oh yeah,
right? Something like 80% fail in the first year and another 80% fail in the year after that. And the primary reason startups fail is they run out of cash. I mean, they're just not liquid enough, or they can't cover it. So managing expenses, raising capital and managing expenses are really important skills. So if I can focus the resources I do consume on those things that are strategic and find other ways to get the other elements, other less expensive ways or low cost ways to get the other elements, then that's usually a pretty good formula.
yeah, yeah. I love that, and I believe, yeah, I read that stat the other day. Like it's a pretty scary number out there. You know, it's not as glamorous as just coming up with an idea and then boom, it's gonna work, right? Like the odds are unfortunately low.
Well, even in a VC world where you have professional investors, I mean it's I don't know, I want to say 3 in 10, but two of those are probably even money, where maybe you
Yeah,
get your money back, and you need a home run in order to make the portfolio show
keep going. Yeah,
IRR and raise your next fund. So even with professional investors, picking winners is hard. I mean, but I don't think that you should let that deter you. I mean, you need to dream big and get off the couch and get in the game and you know
for sure.
um, reminds me of that old song, put me in coach, I'm ready to play.
Oh yeah, yeah. Put me in, coach. Yeah. Straight. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so, well, you kind of alluded to some VCs. Like, what should founders be, I guess, equipped for if they are trying to raise money, right? And like, maybe I know the market's probably shifted a little bit, but like, what were some learning lessons when you were doing it that you would maybe pass along?
Well, I would say first of all that VC funding is not the right kind of money for everybody. I mean,
Mm,
there's some definitely comes with some strings, and
yep.
I mean, if you want to call your own shots, you take VC's money and you've got VCs on the board, you're going to have to answer to somebody. That's not always a bad thing, by the way, because a lot of them come with knowledge and experience and industry connections of their own. I mean, we started Zehr, we had Mike Coughlin on our board, who was a former Deputy Postmaster General of the U.S. Postal Service.
Mm,
And he was able to get us meetings with the U.S. Postal Service, which allowed us to create strategic alliances, turned out to be very important to our success. But there were some other things we wanted to do that we didn't get to do. And in hindsight, the board was probably right. Um, but recognize that when you take somebody else's money, you're bringing on a partner, and
yeah.
that partner's going, and they're not every partner wants to be silent, right? And but if we looked at the whole spectrum of, first of all, we have to think about what it is we're creating. We already talked about that, and then what's the right way to capitalize that. The longer, in terms of capitalizing a business, we always have to think in terms of debt versus equity.
Mm,
And the more debt we take on is the more leverage we have, and the less equity we have to give away. But debt comes with some risk too, because usually there's repayment that happens, and anytime you're repaying that, you're taking capital out of the business, which can make things more tenuous, especially when cash is tight. With some kind of an equity investor, I get the money. I may not have the debt service, but I do have people to answer to, and I do have some expectations that need to be met, and I do lose some control. I mean, there oftentimes a VC will take a significant portion of the company, and they have the ability to take out the CEO or founders, right? Make adjustments to secure their investment. With that said, there's a range of different decisions you can make in that financing. You can, number one with a small startup is really friends and family. Think about Chipotle. Chipotle was started by, with friends and family investment. They bought an old donut shop near a university in Colorado and brought in, Steve Ells brought in his dad's money, and they, made that work. Until at some point they brought in McDonald's and went public, and they did other things, but that's how they got their start. Sometimes there's angel investors. There's angel investor networks across the country. So sometimes you get an angel investor involved. They can be more flexible because they're not institutional, but at the same time, that a lot of them want to be actively involved, which can be challenging. And especially if you're raising, it used to be in Portland, Oregon, things have changed a lot, I think. But back in the day, if you were raising funds from angel investors, you're raising at, $30K, $50K chunks, and then you get 20 investors involved, independent investors, and everybody wants a voice, and that becomes very hard to manage, You can look at strategic investors, like I mentioned, we had money from HP. There are lots of companies like HP and Cisco come to mind, or organizations that tend to do their R&D by investing in startups, see what sticks, who gets traction, and then if it works in their portfolio, they'll acquire them. So then that strategic money maybe sometimes comes with less active management. And then, of course, venture capital. The reason why I'm giving you a whole range, there's a whole range of funding there, is that, first of all, there's the limitations I mentioned over control with venture capital, but also most companies don't qualify for venture capital. I mentioned that formula where they're looking for 1 in 10 that's a home run. So you're going to have home run potential to fit in any reasonable tier 1 VC's portfolio. And not all businesses can show that kind of growth profile. Some businesses, even on their best day, they could never show the growth profile of an Amazon or an NVIDIA or Google or something like that. They also need to have some kind of defensible, market niche. First of all, a market need, a problem they're solving, but then some defensible solution, and not everybody fits that mold either. Yeah. So, and VCs come, and I know this is not necessarily an episode on VCs, but VCs have different areas they specialize in too. Some specialize in e-commerce, some specialize in, these days, AI. Some specialize in different areas. And so you want to find somebody who really, oftentimes you want to find somebody who really understands your market niche and could bring additional value in that way to your organization.
Yeah, and is VC, is it always institutional, and then angels more like individual, or?
VC almost by definition is institutional investment. We would call it institutional investment. So for me anyway, institutional would mean a VC, because those are professional investors. Usually the way VC is set up as an investment fund, right? So we have a general partner, or we have partners that we have limited partners who are the investors, and we have partners who are making investments and managing the fund, right? And that's kind of what they do. They're institutional because that's what they do for a living. Institutional may be an organization like Hewlett-Packard, right, where they've got a group that's making strategic investments that they think will benefit the company, but it's part of a larger organization. It can also be sometimes a bank or other kind of financial institution. I know one time we looked at investment from Lehman Brothers or other kinds of financial intermediaries like that. So those are what I would call an institutional investors. You can have institutions that'll participate in an angel round. I mean, there's nothing that stops them from doing that. But typically, when we're talking about an angel round, we're talking about investment from individuals, private individuals, or families, family offices. They need to be accredited investors, which means that at least last time I read the rules, it meant they had a net worth of more than $1 million or combined income of something like 400K or something.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the million is like your primary residence can't count towards that number. I think is
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
only like asterisk there kind of
Yeah.
thing. There's a lot
Exactly.
of people that bought their house in 2019 that are like, wait, am I accredited? It's like, not quite. So,
Yeah, so there's rules about that, regulatory rules.
yeah.
Here in the state of Oregon, we have some additional rules that allow us to take investment capital from individuals who aren't accredited investors.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how that's worked out overall. I haven't seen any big success stories.
Yeah.
Um, and I think some other states are that too. But in general, angel investors are accredited investors. And there are a couple of big networks of those guys like Keiretsu Forum or others who have meetings around the country to provide deal flow for people who are interested in that. Um, but you are taking on partners too, so it's not all money is created equal. I mean, just because somebody's willing to write a check doesn't mean that that's a good thing for your business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because like they're like you said, they're a partner and I liked what you said earlier about maybe trying to find somebody that could strategically help you, like the US the previous postmaster general. Like they opened a lot of doors for you. I think that's super unique rather than here's a check. It's like, oh no, this individual had a lot of opportunities that could open doors for you that probably helped scale your business to even new strides.
Right. When you can do that two ways too. I mean, one way is by having board members. So venture capitalists typically, if they put money in, they're going to want to manage their money. So they'll
Yeah.
ask for a seat or two on the board. That's pretty typical. They may want to fill out the board with additional members. Mike Coughlin was not and it didn't put money into the business. He came to the business because of his expertise, and our investors had to vote on that, to add a board member, and they thought that was a good idea. We had some other really interesting board members. But there's a lot of times those startups will have an advisory board too. An advisory board oftentimes will include other people with specific areas of expertise. So if you look at your team and you say, I'm a little weak in marketing or I'm a little weak in industry experience or whatever, then you can bring in individuals who have that knowledge or have that experience and maybe give them a piece of equity. You don't pay them cash because that would take money away from the company, which we know is a finite resource and a critical resource. So we can create an advisory board where those folks are compensated with stock, which also motivates them to assure the company is successful. And there's usually certain requirements around participation. They have to participate in a certain amount, show up for meetings, and take your call when you call,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. Um, but that can be real beneficial as well.
Yeah. No, this is an awesome breakdown, by the way. I've never had like a good, solid breakdown of angel versus VC versus friends and family, and then thinking about it in the strategic way. So I'm glad that we went that direction because I think a lot of people got some value out of just some of that information because it is a little tough to keep track of with all the different types. And you definitely brought some good perspectives there when it comes to raising money. Let me ask you this though: like I know you've raised a good chunk of money in your past entrepreneurial endeavors. Where was some areas that like you maybe hit a wall in your early business journey and like how did you get past that? Because I know you shared one of like people were failing because of lack of marketing and sales or lack of direction. Like I know there's definitely a lot of people listening that do have startups right now and they're like, I'm hitting a wall kind of thing. So like what was maybe something that you hit early on and then what did you do to get past that?
Um, in terms of specific examples, I'll have to think about that in a minute, but I can talk in more general terms too. And, the no matter how, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me.
All right, good.
Um, no matter how much we plan, there's going to be a gap between what we need to be successful in the marketplace and what we've built to offer to the marketplace. So what people talk about a lot of times, and I know you've heard this before, is this idea of a pivot,
Hmm.
creating a minimum viable product. So the minimum product you have to get in the marketplace and get immediate feedback, and then being able to use that feedback to tune the product to fit the market. I actually have some slides I use to talk about um, a model we use called the strategic marketing model. And so we look at the market need, but then, we'll need to look at the demographic and the offering, the product offering. And then oftentimes there's an iteration that happens as we tune the offering to that market segment or adjust the segment, right? The segmentation to take advantage of the product. Um, but we have to be willing to pivot. I mean, so often it's maybe not the right term, but we do see a lot of founders who are captivated by their invention or captivated by what they want to create, so captivated that they're not willing to be flexible. But at the end of the day, I mean, the vision I have for the product or the market or the company is important, but what's going to build success is delivering something that the market wants or needs. And so we have to be willing to listen to the market and make the changes required. And the faster, the better. I mean, because every minute we don't, we're just burning up cash, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be moving fast and looking at the marketplace, getting the feedback, making the changes, getting out there and getting additional feedback. If we're going to fail, we want to fail fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point you made of like most founders are maybe like a little too attached to the idea or the direction where they wanted to go. And it's like, well, you got to build a pivot, and if the market requests or wants or needs something else, right? It's like it's important to do so because you got to make money to have a viable business.
Right, exactly. And nobody has all the answers, right? So you have
Yeah,
to be able to take feedback and and grow from it, and then not have hurt feelings,
yeah,
just embrace it and take the value you can, but not every feedback is right. Piece of feedback is right either. So I mean, we're going to have to be diligent about that. We're going to have to look at it and say, does that make sense or does it not? And, can we use that to advance our cause? If yes, then let's do it and get moving,
yeah,
right? Um, everybody has to be moving fast, right? We want to think, but we want to move fast because we don't have a lot of time for, um, well, time is like money. It's a limited resource that we don't have a lot of. So we want to get out there, um, and figure out how to be successful. And we want to do that relatively quickly if we can.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. Let me ask you
And
this. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say the other point I wanted to make is that we don't often talk about this, especially in the university environment, is that sales is super important,
Hmm.
right? I mean, if we can't sell a product or service, then everybody else can just go home. I mean, no matter how great the
Yeah,
technology is, if we can't sell it, then there's no point. And so when in our organization, we always talk about everybody's in sales, right? We all have to understand who the customer is, what the customer needs. If somebody needs to talk to a customer, you know, everybody's on board to do that. I mean, so, we're together into making this company successful, which means everybody's in sales. Everybody's got to be on board with moving the company forward.
yeah. Yeah, that's I was reading like years ago. I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and he was talking about the importance of sales and how this author asked him like, "Hey, like how I can't get my book to sell. Like, what should I do?" And he's like, "You need to learn how to like sell your vision for the book." And she was like, "Well, I'm not like I didn't go to school to be in sales. Like, I wrote a book. Like, it was some sort of like nonfiction book, but his point was like, well, you need to learn how to sell and communicate and paint the picture of the vision. And that was just one book, but like imagine like your perspective as a company. Everyone kind of needs to embody that.
Right. Well, and sales. I mean, especially in the university environment, we oftentimes don't teach sales. We think of sales as a bad thing, right? It's like people think of the guy in the Madras plaid coat trying to sell a used car, but professional sales, enterprise sales, is anything but that. I mean, it's professionals helping customers solve problems, right? So they're engaging with a customer, understanding what's going on, trying to figure out what the problem is, what's the right solution, whether it's ours or somebody else's, right? And we're helping customers be successful. And if you think about sales as helping customers be successful, number one, it can be very complex, especially selling in an enterprise where we have multiple levels of decision makers, right? But it also requires that we're, honest and open and working with the right attitude to help our customers be successful. At Sequent Computers, where I worked, was a startup that was also an Intel spinoff, was very successful. Had an IPO, was eventually sold to IBM. The motto was, we sold database servers,
Mm.
multiprocessor database servers. And the motto of the company was, our business is your success. Because we realized that the only way we can be successful is by making our customers successful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think putting the customer first, like as cheesy as that sounds, but if you have that intention when you're meeting with them, like you're not gonna come across as like this sleazy salesperson. It's like, hey, like we're truly here to help. Like, let me show you how that can be done, kind of thing. But dude, I
Mhm.
agree with you. Like, I'm on the enterprise side. Like, I mean, some of these deal cycles are like a year, 2 years with like
Mhm.
10 to 15 buyers. It's not as simple as like, hey, you want to come look at this car, test drive it? All right, buy it, yes or no. It's like way more strategic in the weeds than that. But I always tell young people, like, get into sales as your first job. Even if you're like, I don't know, like, you're going to learn how to communicate, build relationships. You're going to learn how to manage your calendar. There's so many just intangible and tangible skills that you can take to any career path, whether you do sales for a year and you're like, you know what, I kind of like software engineering better. That's just where my mind's at.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, well, you just learned how to like manage your calendar, communicate, build relationships. Like that's going to take you far in any career. So,
No, I agree with you. And I think there you touch on another point too. Another big part of sales is communication,
yep.
right? Understanding where people are coming from and being able to communicate well. Um, And what the research shows is that even if you're not in technology startups, maybe you just spend your career in the corporate world. Um, when you first come out of school, what tends to make you successful are your technical skills. If you're an accountant, how good an accountant are you? If you're an engineer, how good an engineer are you? But when you're 10 years out, 15 years out, and more of your career, and you want to rise in management, your communication skills are what determine your success, much more so communication organization skills, much more so than your technical skills. So individuals who want to grow in their career need to acquire those skills that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always say, like, if you want to get better at communication, just have more conversations. It doesn't have to be like at a work environment. It could just be calling a buddy and catching up with them or meeting face to face for coffee. Like, I feel like not enough people with AI and innovation, like all those things are great, right? But
Mhm.
it's like I feel like not enough people are leveraging the old school communication that's going to take them far. So
Sure, and it's really easy to underestimate the value of relationships too.
yeah,
I mean, you build relationships with people, you build trust, and then it becomes easier to work together. I'm not going to say, sell, I mean, but work together to find solutions. I
yep,
mean, it becomes a partnership rather than a, transaction.
yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this, and then I'd love for you to highlight a lot of the cool things that you're doing. But before that, so I know you obviously have university experience. I think you mentioned when we talked on the phone, have experience with business, finance, marketing, sales. I know you're around a lot of younger people who probably do want to just do something successful with their life. You obviously also have a lot of business experience. All that said, what are some, I guess, opportunities for younger people to get into from a business perspective? Like I know you got into some good ones early on, right? But like what is that in today's 2025 business world that maybe people should be on the lookout for?
Well, that's a great question.
And
And
it doesn't have to be like the correct answer. It's just wanting your
yeah,
honest opinion based on kind of what you've seen.
right. I was going to say, I mean, it's going to depend on the individual,
Yep.
what your career path is, what your vision of success looks like, what you're comfortable doing. I remember when I was first graduating, from the university, a degree in finance. I had all these jobs selling, potential job opportunities, selling securities, right? And at that point in my life, sales just didn't seem like something I wanted to do. And at this point in my life, I do some element of sales every single day, So, but at that point, that wasn't the right path for me. And so, I mean, that's the other thing you'll find is that the right answer depends. It changes over time
Mm.
as you grow, right? As you grow and your goals change and you understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. Um, I would just say, it's good to, get out of school and get started, just dig in and get some experience solving problems and working with people and building relationships and looking for opportunities. Um, there are people that do. I mean, these days, especially teaching entrepreneurship in the university environment, there are lots of people that try to do startups right out of the university. And I wouldn't discourage them from doing that, but it's often useful to have more kind of fundamental experience about how business works and how relationships work and how to meet goals, make, prioritize and do just some basic stuff that experience is helpful, I think, for a lot of folks. Um, once again, this idea of relationships is important. I can share one story, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But this idea of networking and relationships is a really important one. I remember graduating from, when I graduated my MBA, I really wanted to be a VC because I had this background in finance, background in technology. So I spent a lot of time, and I just made a list of all these interesting VC people I wanted to talk to. And one of the funny things about being a student is when you're a student, people will give you access that they wouldn't give you access to if you weren't. So I made this list. And there was all these people, well-known people I read about in the press and stuff. And I'd call and I'd say, I'm really thinking about a career in VC. Do you have 10 minutes? Do you have 10 minutes to tell me what you do? A day in the life of, a day in your life. What does that look like? And I would find that these people would give freely their time. They say, sure, I'll give you 10 minutes. And once you get them on the phone, it turns into 30 minutes, right? And they want to tell you about what they do and what they're working on, what they like and what they don't like. And I made this big list. And one of the questions I asked every one of those folks was, if you wanted to get into VC, how would you do that? And what the consensus seemed to be, well, one way to get into VC is to have, to have some success financially in finance. So either have a startup that's been successful or, so something on the founder side, but also having significant investment banking experience or finance success, something like that. Or secondly, having success in the startup. And in particular, the companies, as we talked about earlier, the companies that we have issues with usually have issues with sales and marketing. So if you had sales and marketing expertise, that would be a really good thing. And I thought about that. I thought, oh, that's cool. So I went through the same list and I said, Wall Street at that time was kind of cratered. There wasn't a lot of those finance jobs available. And I was really interested in working in startups. So I went through the same list. I said, I heard what you said, and I really think a marketing job would be cool. So if I wanted a job in marketing or sales, what should I do? What kind of position should I look for? And who should I call? And I went through it. Every one of those people, just about everyone, responded and gave me ideas. And then I made a list. I called those people. I talked to people in marketing and sales, and I kept talking to these people that are product managers. And they were talking about how being a product manager was kind of like running a company within a company, except you didn't have to worry about making payroll, right? You had a product, you had market, you had developers, and I thought that was really cool, like a really cool way to get to know how to build a startup. And so I went through and I talked to a bunch of people like that. And then once I decided that's what I wanted to do, then I went through and I called the same group of people. I said, hey, I really want to do that. I'm looking for an opportunity. Where would I look? Who would I call? And, within a couple of months, I found this great opportunity as a product line manager working on software engineering tools, and, which was the start of a lot of other great things. But it all came through the relationships, through networking and building this core group of people who are willing to share and to help me be successful. And I think so much of business is built on that. You see tools like LinkedIn these days that try to automate that process, but there's still no substitute from having those personal relationships. And I think if you reach out and try to talk to people, you'll be surprised how many people really want to talk and are willing to share and willing to help, others be successful too.
Yeah, I love all of that. That's the coolest story, and I think it just goes to show like one of the most efficient ways to get from point A to point B is by learning from somebody who's already done it before. And I think from what I found, successful people are open to sharing advice to other people who want it. I mean, the amount of people when I was first starting my podcast that I talked to, I was like, hey, like I'm trying to start a podcast. What do I do? How do I do this? Da, 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 da. Even down to like my guest outreach tracking where I'm like, is this scheduled when it's coming out? Like my whole content calendar that I was alluding to earlier, literally just got from another podcast host and I just subbed out all the names with all my current guests. And I'm like, first off, that saved me like 10 hours. Second, this person is like a very well-known podcast host. Somehow they talk to me on the phone and I'm like, that's awesome. I have the same template, not going to use the name, as insert top, I think, 10 business podcast. I'm like, this is awesome. But I love that story because it just drives it home and then it worked really well for you.
Yeah, and I share it with students too. I mean, I think it's also an incentive to get out there and start building relationships before you graduate, right? Be able to
Yes.
plan for what you might want to do. And certainly there's nothing wrong with, with picking up a gig at Starbucks or McDonald's or something if you need to pay the bills. But if you can start early and find something that's going to add value long term, that's often a better plan.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I'd add there to the I guess the approach to the college students, like I remember when I was in college, I was going to networking events and like the first couple times I went there, I didn't really like rehearse of like my who I was, why I was there kind of thing. And so I'd be in
Hmm.
the room with these people, I'd be like, hey, like I'm Chris. And then I'd be like, what do I say now? Right. So not that I didn't know how to talk to people, but it was just like, okay, I want to kind of get my point across. So and then I went back in. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have kind of a talk track of like, hey, I'm Chris, I'm looking to get a sales internship. Here's kind of what I've done so far, blah blah blah. And then as soon as I started like doing that, I actually had more doors open. So to your point, the only thing I'd add, I'm sure you agree with, is just like have some sort of like 15-20 seconder of like who you are, why you're there, what you're doing, kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, an elevator pitch,
Yeah.
kind of. You should have you have your own personal brand, just like you have your product has a brand, and your brand, personal brand, should have an elevator pitch. It should have a set of bullet points that, this is what I'm selling, right? You're
Yep.
selling you,
Yep.
and what is that all about?
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate all that you've shared. I would love if you could touch on what you're doing with Zehr Mail. I know before we recorded, you mentioned you have an exciting new product out there. I love Zehr Mail's model, by the way. I mean, just helping to streamline a lot of the physical mail processes for business development. I mean, I think that's super important, especially right now in this kind of like just social media ad world where you're just getting bombarded by things on Instagram, Facebook, all that. It's like I love kind of what you're doing. So I'd love if you touched on that for a little bit as we're closing out.
Sure. No, well, we're primarily a software company. We automate the process of, launching direct mail campaigns. We built out a platform for a lot of years that allow you to upload a document, upload a list, see a preview of what you're going to produce. You like what you see, you push the button, you're in the mail tomorrow, the next day at a fraction of the cost.
Mm.
On the back end, we have a network of production partners. So we spread it across the United States and try to route things electronically as far as we can. Then we turn them into print. We deliver them via the mail. You can track the delivery of the documents and see when you've actually get responses. And we built in a lot of using software. We built a lot of tools around the process that help make that process work. Um, the mail's an interesting one. There's a lot of different tools available that as you mentioned. Um, but I think about it, a lot of times when people are thinking about marketing and sales or marketing in particular these days, they're talking about a tool. Do you do AdWords? Are you doing social media? Are you doing this? But that's kind of backwards. I mean, what we want to do is think about the problem we're trying to solve. I mean, I started my career, the very beginning of my career, I started as an auto mechanic, where you got this car, somebody comes in, it's got a knock under the hood, and you have to how do I figure out what that is and how to fix it? So you start with the symptom and, not with the tool. You don't say, well, I've got a wrench. Let's see if I can fix that, that
Yeah.
knock. So it's the same thing here. You say, okay, I've got this target audience I want to reach. Here's the product or service I'm using. What I want to do is get their attention and motivate action. And what's the best tool to do that? And I can give you some examples of stuff we've done in the past that embody that. But so it's not direct mail or e-marketing or AdWords or something. It's probably some combination of all of those things, right? Depending on what we're trying to do as we drive a customer, as we take the customer down their customer journey. So direct mail does, if you think about direct mail, the tool, it does some things that no other medium will do. One is it can reach every household and business in America affordably. A lot of mediums, people use email or other kinds of tools because they're cheap, but they may not have the same kind of reach. Secondly, the demographics are very well defined. So if I want to reach Jewish dentists in New Jersey that bought a car in the last 6 months, I can find that list, right? If I want to reach somebody who's got a tax lien that's 3 months old, I know where to get that list, right? So I can reach exactly the person that needs my product or service, exactly the person whose problems I can solve. I can reach them. That's not possible with most other mediums. The other thing is that it's universal. It's built into the American psyche. So, people are used to getting mail. The Postal Service would call it the mail moment. When you get home, you go through the mailbox and you're looking for cool stuff you may have received in the mail. I think they over romanticize it a little bit. But the problem, the idea is still the same. It's part of their process, their daily process. Most people look through their mail. They pull out stuff they want to respond to. Maybe some stuff go in the fridge. Maybe some stuff won't. But so that's the question is, how do I break through that cluster and make a difference? Clutter a bit, make a difference. But that's really different. Think about the spam you get in your email box and how you feel about that. Think about how you feel when you get a cold phone call from a telemarketer, or you're in the airport and somebody's blasting stuff to you on a billboard, that you not only do you not want to see, you would never buy that product or service. So, depending on what we're trying to accomplish, direct mail has some attributes that are very powerful, and most of our customers understand that, and they're able to use it successfully. I don't know how much time you have to work with here, Chris.
Let's see. Yeah, we got a couple more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we worked on a school bond measure in the Grand Oregon, and there we segmented. Locally they were trying to match state funds. In order to match state funds, they had a bond they had to generate of a certain size, and they had to retire an existing bond. The way that the funding works in that particular county is that it's paid through property taxes. So we were able to get a voter file of all the people that wanted to vote, because we had to get approval from the voters to have that bond. So we were able to get from the county, get a file of registered voters, because that's our audience. And then we were able to do an overlay on that and divide that between homeowners and renters. Homeowners will end up paying the tax, right? And then we looked at homeowners with kids versus homeowners without kids, and renters with kids without kids, and be able to build a message that's different for each of those audiences. So the people who have kids and they're paying the tax, they have some real personal benefit because their kids will benefit from it. The others maybe were selling community, right? They're going to help their neighbors by contributing to this tax. And you can follow that thread, how you change up that messaging. We built a website because we need some place to have the content. We work with Parent Teachers Association, did research, outreach. We went to coffee meetings. We went and talked to people face to face. We got video content that we put on our website, and we used to push that out in social media. We also, Oregon is a vote by mail state, so we know when the ballots are coming. We know when the ballots are due. So we were able to, based on those segmented voter files, we could go out with a postcard mailer right when ballots arrived in the mailbox and say, here's what you should know about this bill. Here's how this benefits you. Maybe we do a reminder about halfway because, the reason why the first one's important is because some people just get it and they vote, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to hit those people early. Halfway, we remind them. And then right before ballots are due, we remind them again. Along the way, we're also doing yard signs. We're doing door hangers. We're doing some other stuff. But it's all designed as a system to move the buyer, or in this case, the voter, through this journey and help them make a decision that helps their community.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the customer journey. It takes multiple touch points to actually like generate that just peak initial interest, right? So I like that you mentioned that it's coupled with like multiple different mediums there, and I love that approach that y'all have too, where it can kind of like systematically break it down, like renters, homeowners, without kids, with kids, because like to your point, it's going to be a different message to somebody who's got like 2 or 3 young kids that are using that system versus maybe a younger family with no kids. It's like, how can you kind of tug on the emotional side of a human, but it takes some personalized approach. So I know we're solving a different problem for those audiences.
Yes, you have a
100%.
retired couple that owns their home. You're solving a different problem for them than for the folks who have kids in school.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like, I'm just looking at my neighborhood. Like, there's a younger family over here. We're a younger family. The lady across the streets, I mean, she's probably like 80 something. Like, so, it's like a whole different message, whole different thing that we all care about. Right. But yeah, man. So if people do want to check out Zehr Mail, where can they go from a website perspective?
Zehr Mail's at www.zairmail.com. So it's like airmail with a Z on the front. So zairmail.com. We also have a new product we're rolling out, which is a desktop application, which will allow you to drop a document on the icon or the application, and then it'll turn into a letter that you just arrives in the U.S. Postal Service, even just a single letter. So it's a document that you want to turn into a single letter. First 2 letters are free, so it's no risk. And the download is free, no credit card required. So I would encourage people to download it, give it a try, www.zairmail.com/speedy. And we talked about pivoting and customer feedback. You've got customer feedback. I'm ready to listen. Just tell us how to be successful.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. If people want to connect with you, do you have a LinkedIn profile, or where's the?
I do. www.linkedin.com/in/Wilson Zehr.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, Wilson, this was great. I love that we talked about funding for a good bit there too, just kind of breaking down the different levels there. And I love what y'all are doing, especially just kind of the example that you shared, like really helped it all come together for me. Cause I was doing some background research, but I was like, okay, like what is the big problem that they're solving? And like, I'm sure you got a million other examples that we could spend all day talking about. But again, thanks for all the value that you brought to the table today.
No way. Happy to do it. And thank you for the opportunity once again.
Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to tune into this week's episode of Next Level Minds. Be sure to connect with Wilson. Be sure to check out Zehr Mail. Otherwise, definitely share this episode with a family member, friend, or colleague. If you got some value out of it, make sure you have a fantastic week ahead.